Hello friends, and welcome to another figure study, where once again I'm looking at something that is probably a little too big for my setup. But I'm giving it a shot anyway. That thing that is too big being, as you can see, Fans Hobby's Double Evil, their version of Overlord. I know I put this figure as my number 2 for the year. I forget which year it was, but it was my top 2 out of my top 10 for that year, and I never actually made a video on it. Mostly because it's a daunting task to cover something this large that also has a tank mode, a jet mode, a base mode, and a robot mode, and what are basically little Powermaster figures, and it's a lot to go over. So the reason I'm starting in base mode is because, in my mind, this is the weakest of the different modes that this guy can do. I don't think it's bad. I actually think it's relatively effective for what it is. I just find it to be the least interesting, I guess, out of all of them. That being said, I'm really impressed with just how much dedicated engineering is in this figure just for this mode. You've got dedicated parts, like these little antenna things up at the top here, that they store away in the tank bits for every other mode, but like you've got these dedicated parts up here, you've got this little flip out gun platform here. There are little struts that fold down on the underside of these tank chunks that keep these things supported, and there are also actual legs that fold down on the inside here to keep this relatively stable. There are fold out ramps well, you can see it more on this side, but fold out ramps here that connect the tank bits. There's spring loaded tips for the jet turbine point things, which we'll see when we look at the jet mode proper. There's a little swing out. It's behind the ramp here, but there's like a little swing out strut in the main section. The way that this thing both sits down and attaches to these bits, so like this is nice and solid. Like you could pick the base mode up by this piece. It's really impressive just how much they put into this base mode. But when it comes to how I would display this thing, this would be kind of at the bottom of the list. That being said, it is fun for what it is. It's got lots of little ramps, it's got lots of little details, you've got, because of the way they connect, you've got little swiveling antenna things, some tighter than others. You've got a little rotating and articulated robotic arm thing. There's this, which we'll see more in tank mode, which is cool. You've got places for the different guns to plug in. Little places for the Powermasters to sit. It's really pretty fun. Just not my favorite mode out of everything that this guy does. Now in terms of size for the base, here it is with a few little tiny fellows that I have on hand, which I feel like scale a little bit better with what's going on here. Of course, here it is with the standard deluxe squad, which, yeah. For those of you who might not be aware, this is a very big toy. And here it is with the duck tank. Now one more thing I want to show off before I turn this into individual vehicle modes is I do have the upgrade kit for Double Evil here, which includes a larger gun, alternate faces, and IDW style chest plates. I've not bothered with the IDW style chest plates because I feel like shape-wise it just doesn't work. IDW Overlord, from what I've seen, is a bit more slender and less boxy. So just slapping plates on the front that look like the chest plates for the IDW version just doesn't really do it for me. That being said, I love that they gave him a smirking face, and he definitely needed a bigger gun. And the reason I bring this up is because I wanted to show that you can incorporate the bigger gun into the base mode. Pop this out, put that off to the side, and there's a little peg hole down in here, which of course you're not going to be able to see, but there's this little square peg that actually rotates on the handle of the gun here. And the larger gun, which he comes with, which there they are together, and yeah, this is much more fitting, I feel. But anyway, the larger gun also has that little rotatey rectangular bit on the bottom, so you can actually plug the larger gun in where this gun was plugged in and use that as like a little rotating spot for the bigger gun. You don't have, like, it can't compact like the smaller gun can, and of course if you have this plugged in, then that gets in the way, but this can rotate while staying plugged in, so that's an option. But okay, now that I've done my part to cover that stuff, we are going to put this guy into his vehicle modes real quick and then start the video proper. Not a complicated transformation or anything like that, it's just these things are so big and chunky. Where to start? I guess we'll start with the jet, just because it is the biggest one and probably the most awkward to work around. So the jet is massive. I'll be doing a more proper size comparison in a few minutes, but yeah, not a complaint other than the fact that it makes it very difficult to display in this mode because it is so freaking large, but it looks really great. It's definitely got that like Overlord jet look where it's primarily black in the center with the kind of whitish turbine bits along the sides. The detailing on this is relatively simplistic, but there's a lot of nice little bits here and there with the molding that do make it work. And I mean, that's kind of Fans Hobby's aesthetic. They don't go for like overly textured stuff. They generally go with much simpler surface detailing and, you know, in favor of big, chunky, big toys. I do like, though, that there are these little bits of kind of like a dull silver or light gunmetal in a few places, including the sides of the fins on the back and the tops of the wings. And you also get little pops of purple that are painted in a few places, which does look really nice. And of course there are these pointy turbine bits, and these are the spring-loaded things that I was talking about for the base mode, where these bits, because of the way they turn, have to sit down on whatever the surfaces you're putting it on, so these just push up so that they don't get potentially damaged or snapped off or anything like that. On the underside, it's kind of obviously a robot torso, kind of, with a big jet nose sticking off the top there, but I kind of feel like if you didn't know what to look for, this isn't super duper obviously a robot torso, though I mean it is, you know, knowing what's there, very obvious. But I do appreciate too they painted in this kind of dull gray in a couple of spots on the underside of the jet as well. Also, there are these missile things, which I know in like the first run of this toy, these things popped off super easy. Mine, I'm pretty sure I didn't get a first run. They're not like clipped in place, but like they're not, you know, they're not coming off. They're on there relatively solidly. So I don't have to worry about them like flopping off if anything gets jostled, which is good because they end up on the back in robot mode, and that's a little bit, Though I'm probably going to toss these in storage when I'm done with this video, because these only really serve a purpose for the jet mode, and they're so tiny and easy to miss with everything else going on with this thing. They seem kind of unnecessary. Aside from that, you also get rolling landing gear. So this enormous jet can actually roll a bit. I feel like the problem with its rolling is just that it's big and heavy. So even though the wheels roll pretty freely, there's just a lot of weight being placed down on them. Now, in terms of little gimmicky things, you can, if you want, try and use this cannon that was meant for the base mode. It kind of accordion hinges out, and you could do kind of like an over-the-cockpit thing if you wanted. But another thing you could do is there's this gun up here. You just kind of pull that up a little bit to give yourself some room and swing it around and extend the barrels, and now you've got this gun kind of firing over the top, which, you know, it works. This piece also seems kind of superfluous compared to everything else going on with this guy, but it's fine, and it tucks away relatively inoffensively. And lastly, of course, there is what amounts to a Powermaster. I don't know if Fans Hobby has given these figures names, but for the sake of argument, I'm going to call this guy Giga. And he looks the part. He's got the kind of dark limbs and turquoise torso and the gold bit on the back, of course, from the, I guess, G1 cartoon? Whatever cartoon he's from. The detailing's relatively nice too, and even has a surprising amount of articulation. Like you can turn the head left and right. The arms can go up and down a bit. They can swing around. There's no bicep swivel, but you do get little elbows, so you can bend the arms like that. There's no waist rotation, but you can rotate at the hips and go forward and backward, and there is a pretty decent knee bend. So these guys they're tiny, but they're pretty expressive, and we'll see them with the size comparisons in a little bit. But yeah, I think these things are kind of fun for what they are, though they spend most of their time in engine mode or whatever you want to call it for my for my figure. But yeah. As for the tank, there's definitely more going on here color-wise, because you've got this kind of vaguely turquoisey blue, the much darker, kind of like a dull navy blue, and then the lighter gray with darker gray and silver accents in a few places. Lots of little tampo details here and there, like the bits on the front here and on the sides. Even around the back, you've got some detailing. And the weirdly purple tank barrel, which does go up and down, which is nice. Another thing that's cool about this is, spoilers, I guess, for the transformation, though you already saw kind of in the base mode, the tank splits in half completely, including these bits up here. But Fans Hobby engineered a function in here so that even though it splits in half like that, you can still rotate the tank turret. A very loud ratchet, too. So that's very cool. Also, I should point this out before I forget. The add-on giant gun, you are meant to attach it to this. There's this little bit back here that just flips up, and there's a hole back here that goes around the tank barrel, and then you just kind of wedge this down, and that kind of keeps the gun from sliding off. But the problem is now the gun is so heavy, it doesn't really, the tank barrel doesn't support the weight. The upgrade kit does come with this little plastic adhesive piece that you're supposed to stick into one of the sides here, and that does increase the friction and make it so that this does a better job of staying up. But the problem is when it does that, because the plastic piece is so much thicker, it ends up pushing the tank barrel off to one side, so it looks crooked, and I hated that. So I just took the piece off and threw it away because it was so pointless. And yeah, it can't hold the tank barrel up, but it sits just fine. There's even like a little kind of angle to the base of the gun here so that it rests right along the lip of the tank, and you can still rotate it back and forth, so it gets the job done. I mean, it's not like I'm going to be displaying it in tank mode really, but it's an option, and if I wanted to, I could go in with like some floor polish or something to tighten that up. Now, as for that bit I was pointing out in the base mode, there's this little door right up here that you can pop up, and it reveals this little missile launcher thing, which does look pretty cool. And the missiles inside the little missile launcher thing are actually separate bits. So putting the tank down for a minute, you can see they're just like these teeny tiny missiles that you can slide back into the missile tubes. And that is such an unnecessary feature and so superfluous, but superfluous, kind of nifty, if a bit weird. Pointless gimmicks are a big part of what Fans Hobby does, it seems. It's a nifty, chunky tank, even has rubber treads that do move, but they're very difficult to get going, especially because he's been sitting in robot mode for so long. These treads have kind of been, you know, they adhere to a shape and things get a little bit difficult to move. But they do move. They're definitely not as good as Mastermind Creations' Era Sculpture treads, because those are amazing, but they're there, they're functional. Hopefully they won't disintegrate over time. It just sucks that they kind of are such a pain to move, because putting this thing down on a surface and pushing doesn't really work. As for the cockpit section, there is also a little Powermaster figure in there, and as with the jet, there's this little steering wheel thing that does move up and down to accommodate getting the figure in there. It even turns. Like, that is such an unnecessary thing. The articulation on Mega here, I'm going to call her Mega, is exactly the same as Giga, but, you know, the look is very different. You've got the more kind of dull white limbs, still the turquoise center, the black thighs, and then it's more of like silver detailing rather than gold because it matches the kind of chrome going on the back there. Putting the two of them side by side, you can see how they match up. And that is it for all of the vehicle mode and Powermaster stuff. So let me figure out how to set all this up for size comparisons real quick. Here is everything with the standard deluxe squad and the little Powermasters in the front there. And yeah, these vehicles are enormous. There's no getting around it. They're very cool, but they're freaking enormous. Here's everything with the 3 little tiny figures from before, and I think this works pretty well. And lastly, here is everything with the duck tank. So for the transformation, I just put the little Powermasters off to the side, and we're just going to focus on this stuff proper. I am going to speed it up, but I do want to acknowledge this. There's really no good way around this. I'm just going to pop the gun up so you can see what I'm talking about. There's this button here, right here, that you're supposed to press that releases a kind of spring-loaded catch. I'm just going to fold these so I can get a better grip. And that allows this bit to pop forward, and then you can pop this out in theory. Problem is, the way this snaps in place is incredibly awkwardly engineered. It's a little bit scary, so I'm going to try to do it on camera, and if I can't get it to work, then it's going to be off camera, sorry. But push this in, and that allows you to pull this up ever so slightly, and then it's basically just a matter of trying to angle it forward and popping it out, because there are these little bits down in here that hook into these bits here, and it's just it's a process, and I don't like doing it. Oh, that went surprisingly well. Okay. Almost done. This is the kind of base double evil robot mode, we still have to deal with this bit and the leftover ramp and stuff. This technically counts as accessories, but this is also such a big part of Overlord's look, I feel like it's kind of necessary. For the ramp, there's this little cut up here. You just want to pull it straight up. There we go. So you got these two pieces now. This piece will fold in half. Now this will go onto the back of the robot. And the way that works is there are some slots on the underside of this flap here. So if we flip this up, you can see there are the slots right back there that match up with these tabs here. Basically, you just get it lined up and smushed into place like that. Push this back up against the back, and now he's got this little bit of a turquoisey butt flap. So yeah, it's parts forming and it's a little bit unfortunate, but it's out of the way of everything. Now there's a little bit more prep to do for the shoulder for this thing. Basically, there's a little, move this flap out of the way, there's this little tab in here, you want to pull that down and this will act as a brace for the jet shield. You don't have to use this, but it's in the directions and it makes it super freaking solid, so I'm going to do that. And you kind of probably want to push this up because it's easier to reach this with it up and out of the way, but you can have both down at the same time. There we go. It's a little tricky to get your finger in there, but you can have both down, and this will not get in the way of this. So there are these these little tab sections on the side here, and these little grooves on the sides of the shoulder. You just want to line it up and push that in, and that gives him his Telltale Overlord entire jet for a shoulder shield. And now this bit, probably should have done this before I put this on, but this just sits up here. There are these little bits here that sit into these grooves here. So you just put it on like that, and that's all that does. And again, totally not necessary, and it is parts forming, but I don't care. And of course, I forgot one other thing. If we pop this back off again so you can see what I'm doing, this little claw arm bit does store inside the shield. There's this little peg hole on the bottom here, and these pegs inside the shield here, you can just peg it on either side, and that just pegs in like that, and that keeps it out of the way. Put this back on. There we go. So there we have it. Fans Hobbies Double Evil, their Overlord, in his incredibly cool robot mode that is entirely too large, and he's chunky and looks utterly fantastic. For a quick size comparison, just with the base little Powermastery figures, there you go. That's how big they are compared to this thing. It's going to be fun doing the size comparisons in a few minutes. These things are so tiny compared to him, and you can put them in the chest. These doors swing open, and there are these little bits here that you'll want to swing out of the way, and those do serve a purpose. And then you can fold these up and plug them in. So since I showed off Giga the first time, we're gonna use Mega for the transformation. So the transformation for the Powermasters is just straighten out the arms and get them going down. Rotate the legs so that the knees are pointed in. Flip these up, and when you flip the legs up, there are these little grooves on the insides of the backs of the thighs that the tiny fists actually sit in. So when you bring those up, you can kind of see the fists go in there. And then these pegs on the ends of the shoulders will peg into the backs of the heels. Bring these up, peg those in, and there we've got Mega in her engine Powermaster mode thing. And Giga is the same deal, same exact deal. I'll show them from this side. Just rotate that in, bring that up, and the fist goes into the back of the thigh, and that pegs into the shoulder. And same deal, up and around and through, and peg in, and there we go. There is Giga in his engine mode, and these tab into these bits here. They're actually tabs, like these chunks on the sides of the legs that will tab in here, which keeps them in there nice and secure. So just put that in and tab it in place. I'm trying not to push too hard. Why are you fighting me? There you go. So you just put that in, and that'll tab in place. I don't know why Giga's being such a jerk. There we go. So they're all tabbed in, and then these little bits here, those can flip in, and they will actually help to secure these in place. So they're much harder, like they're not going to just fall out on their own with these bits in place if you have the chest plate open. And the chest plate can close with them in there. These are not just for looks. They actually have a function similar to the original G1 toy, where if you push them in, they activate a spring-loaded gimmick. So you push in Giga, and you get this bit popping out. You push in Mega, and these missiles pop out. And then you can close that up if you want. It's so ridiculous, but I love that. It's again, it's kind of fans' hobby being fans' hobby, but this is fun. I don't think it was necessary. I would have been totally happy if that feature wasn't in there, but I do think it's fun that it's in there. As for the accessories, the primary accessory that he has is, of course, this big jet nose for a shield, but he also has his little gun, which this does transform. You can fold down the handle, pull this out, and that will extend. This flips down to create a magazine, and then this barrel pulls out, and that gives him a gun. And that gun is very dinky. Like, it just doesn't... It looks so small in his hands, and I like that it stores and collapses and all that, but I just wish that it was bigger, which is why I got this. And this gun does not transform. There's just the fold-out handle, which is very difficult to get out. But anyway, handle just flips out, and that's it. He's got a much bigger, much chunkier gun that I feel like works a lot better. And we'll see this more as we do, like, I want to do articulation first because of the hands, but that is a very nicely detailed gun. I like the paint job that they did with a lot of it. There's a lot of little details along the sides, and yeah, this is a neat gun. And it does actually have a spring-loaded firing mechanism. There's this button up here that is basically a safety. You push that through so that you see this red on this side, and by pulling back on the barrel, you'll actually fire out a big, chunky bullet thing. It's cool that that's a feature, and then you just push that button in, and that will lock it in place, and now the safety's on. The smaller gun also has some nice painted details, like the lines on the side here and the silver here. It's just too dinky, in my opinion. You know, it's Overlord. It's like giving him the noisy cricket, basically. It's just so tiny compared to him. Again, I appreciate the fact that it collapses so completely to fit into the tank mode, but it's just a little too rinky-dink for my tastes, which is why I'm glad I got this. Now, moving on to the robot mode proper. This thing is a beast, and I love it. The colors are great. I love the combination of the dark blue and the kind of teal-ish colors with a little bit of purple, both for the feet and for those little shoulder spikes. Black accents in a couple of spots, like the hands, the waist section, the little wings on the side, and of course you get more black along the back, but it's on the back. It's funny because I thought I would mind how chunky this guy was with like the enormous tank pods sitting off to the side, and thought maybe when I got him in hand I'd try and find a way to swing them off to the side, but they really don't bother me because they don't get in the way of anything. They sit out a little bit, but that's pretty much it. I have no problem with these. They look good. And I love this look for Overlord. I know that there are a lot of people who prefer the IDW look, and I do think the IDW look is really cool. For a while I wanted to get Mastermind Creations Carnifex because that looked really great. But Double Evil, I just really like the giant, bulky chunkiness of this compared to Carnifex. Carnifex is definitely imposing, but he's much more of a slender look for Overlord. And I'm not trying to say one look is, you know, superior to the other, because I've got no stake in this. I have no nostalgia for Overlord. But in terms of the aesthetic that appeals to me the most, it's this. I just really, really like how chunky and imposing he looks. And that speaks to me a little bit better for Overlord, personally. Again, not saying one is right or wrong, just that's what appeals to me. But I love this look. I love the asymmetry of the giant jet thing on his shoulder. And you can actually change things up to have it be held in his hand. If you slide this off, there's a handle here that you can pull down. This handle pulls down and can rotate, which is incredible. And this you can put into his hand and basically have it so that he's holding the shield like a shield. And I like that that option's there. I think it's cool. It's not an option that I plan to ever use. I think that's actually maybe the second time that I've ever flipped that section down. But I appreciate that the option's there. Anyway, getting back to the colors, as I said, there's the nice mixture of blue and teal-ish and purple, and this kind of off-white or extremely, extremely light gray, but then there are a lot of little highlights here and there that help to break things up. Like the fact that in the chest plate alone, you've got white, and then you've got a very dull gray, and then you've also got these kind of colors in the middle here with like the black, the yellow, the red, the purple. In the torso, midsection, you've got these bits for the gimmick that stand out. You've got some silver and purple in the pelvis area to accent the black. In the shin sections, you've got the really nice teal-ish color, but then this kind of off-white, dull gray in a few places, and like this much lighter blue. In the arms, some really nice dull gray with like even slightly darker gray accents in a few different places. It's just such a really nice mixture of colors that at a glance it still kind of looks simplistic, but when you really start looking at the details, there are definitely some interesting details there. I feel like the only missed opportunity here is there are some molded bits in the torso here that I feel like could have benefited from maybe using either a black or like a darker blue than what we've got here to just kind of add to that layered color effect that we got in a few other places, but it's not a necessity by any means. I just think it maybe would have been cool if they pushed it just a little bit further in a few places. As for the actual detailing, just like with the jet and the tank, it's typical fans hobby where it's less about the intricate molded details and more about just the big chunks, big satisfying chunks, though there are definitely some intricate for fans hobby anyway details throughout, like the bits that I pointed out, like the different colors and the arms and stuff like that. You've got some nice line work. The thighs, while they are pretty basic looking, there are some nice molded bits in a few places. One thing to point out, when transforming this guy back into a tank, there are actually buttons on the insides of the thighs here. You push the button and that will release the latch that allows you to pop the legs off. You don't have to push the button to put the legs on, they just push up and snap in place, but you do want to push that to get the legs off. And lastly, of course, we got to talk about that head, and that is a very, very Overlord head. The helmet shape with the little antennas is spot on from what I've seen. I like the added kind of gunmetal-y, dull gunmetal-y color for the antenna. And of course there is that face. Now this is not the face that Double Evil comes with. This face is from the add-on kit. And it was a big reason, in addition to that giant gun, that I wanted to get the add-on kit, because he's Overlord. His default expression, it's fine, but it's very high. Yes! I know, I'm almost a half hour late for dinner. I'm so sorry. Let me just finish talking about the robot head, okay? The default expression is definitely neutral and uninteresting, in my opinion. The face looks good, the head looks good, but it's just the expression's kind of eh. So I really like that the add-on kit gives you a couple more faces. I would swap the faces out and show you what he looks like with each one on, but it involves taking the head apart. Like, there's no way to do it without taking the head apart, unfortunately. It's just the way that the thing's constructed. And I don't want to do that because it was a little bit involved in doing it the first time, so I'll just pop up some pictures so you can see what they look like. But yeah, I feel like this face looks great. The expression is fantastic. I love those shiny red eyes. And it's just very fitting. Okay. Honey, you need to get off me if you want me to give you food. Oh, yes. purring. So much purring. But anyway, articulation. The head is on a ball joint and the neck is on a kind of forward and backward hinge as well, so you do get quite a bit of up and down and side to side and rotation and kind of back and forth nod. So yeah, the head can be very expressive. The arms do go forward and backward, as you would expect. As for in and out, there's a joint up here that can go up quite a bit, and then you can also go out on the arms, and if you move the kind of spiky thing out of the way, you can go out further, so the arms can go out a fair bit. There is bicep rotation. The elbows are double jointed, so you can get, you know, about 90. I feel like it's got to be able to go further than that. There you go. So you can do deeper than 90 degrees. It's just you kind of got to work the ratchets a little bit, find a good angle for it. The wrists do swivel, and then the hands have lots of articulation. There's a ball joint at the base of the thumb and another knuckle joint in the thumb, so you can get a lot of movement there. And each of the fingers has 3 knuckle joints kind of along the base there, and then there, and then there. So you can curl the fingers in or splay them out or whatever. There's no spread motion to it, which is unfortunate, but other than that, there's some good finger articulation there. You get a bit of an ab crunch. So this is the straight back and then forward. It's very slight, but it's there and can help with it being, you know, more expressive and posing. There is a waist swivel, and well, I was wrong about the the back flap here. It actually does not get in the way at all of the waist swivel. This is with the ab crunch going back. The ab crunch going forward, it's even less in the way. So yeah, that's pretty cool. As for the hips, you get some skirts that you can move out of the way on the front and side. Can't move the back skirts though, because they're just fixed in place. So the legs can go forward quite a bit, and he does hold up the weight. And then go back that far, can go out a grand total of that far, which isn't much, but goes out. The outward ratchet's not as strong as the forward and backward ratchet, but it holds. You do get a thigh swivel, which is just built into that transformation, the way it connects. The knees are double jointed, and let's see how this goes. So you can flex all of that out of the way like that. That's a pretty good knee bend for this. And then for the feet, they can go forward and backward a fair bit on a pretty nice ratchet, and they do also pivot side to side. So pretty decent posing on this guy for how freaking enormous he is. Okay, so getting back to those weapons. There is, this guy does what the Make Toys figures do, which is great. He has this channel, which I think you can see in the palm there, and the weapon handles have these kind of grooves built into the back. With the fist balled up, you just line that up and push the that track kind of into that groove, and that gives you an incredibly solid connection with the gun. Like, that gun is not coming out of the hand until you want it to. Like, that is... Even if you open up the hand entirely, that is not coming out. Can't help but echo what everyone else says, where I wish more companies did that kind of thing, because it works so well. This gun is the exact same deal. It's got the little track, and there's the channel in the palm, and it works on the other hand too. And you slide it in, and it's not going anywhere. Now, as I'm reattaching these missiles, I want to restate they actually are on there really solidly on mine. It's just I pushed something in the wrong direction, and that caused them to flop out. This, for some reason, doesn't want to stay on right now, and I don't understand why, because it's usually so much better about it. But yeah, there is Double Evil all kitted out, and you can absolutely just abandon the shorter gun in favor of the larger gun if you have the upgrade kit. But I kind of like the dual wielding thing here. It kind of gives that smaller gun a purpose, and I can keep it with the tank if I want to turn him into his tank and jet mode and all that, and it's just, I don't know, it works. I feel like Overlord with a giant gun and a smaller gun makes more sense than with the smaller gun only. He does have that problem that a lot of people have had with Double Evil, in that if you have the legs straight up and down, he wants to lean back. Life hack, I guess. Just bring them out, and like give him a bit of a rotation, and he folds up a lot better. It's like you can find a kind of sweet spot, and I mean, I typically prefer to have my figures in a slightly more dynamic pose than just standing straight up. So this is fine, it's nice and stable. If you want to have them standing straight up and down, you're going to have a little bit of a challenge. Anyway, now that that's all said and done, let's move on to size comparisons. So here is Double Evil with the standard deluxe squad. And as I feel like I've said a few times throughout this video, he's a very, very large toy. Ordinarily, I would avoid him because he is so large and I have so much limited shelf space, but I am willing to make one of only a handful of exceptions for this guy because he is a blast. Here he is with the tinier trio of figures, looking absurdly huge. As preview for the next video, we're sticking with third-party stuff. This time we're going to be taking a look at this handsome fellow. And here he is with the duck tank. So at long last, that is Fans Hobby Double Evil. I finally took a look at this guy. As big as he is, as expensive as he was, because he's not cheap, it doesn't really make a difference because he's just fun. The transformation is way less complicated than I, for whatever reason, thought I remembered it being. It's extremely straightforward. There are a couple of little things to remember where to go, like where the claw arm goes in jet mode and stuff like that, but like it's really small stuff. I was able to get him into his base mode for the start of this video purely based on what I vaguely remembered from like 2 years ago. It's all very intuitive, very straightforward. Everything has a place to go. He's just fun to mess with. And the only real gripe I have, aside from the tilty-backy nature of his structure when he's got his legs straight together, which doesn't really matter to me because I don't generally have my figures standing stock straight anyway, is the fact that getting this off and on for the jet mode is a bit of a chore, just because of the way the angles play out. I'm not afraid that I'm ever going to break anything because it's a very sturdy figure. Like, Fans Hobby does really good sturdy stuff, but it's just a little bit like I wish that they had figured out something else so that it was a little bit easier to pop that bit on and off. I love this figure. He looks so cool, especially now that he's got a properly sized gun and like a really nice evil smirking face. I am just so happy with this thing. So that's plenty of what I think about Double Evil here. What do you all think of this enormous, imposing, awesome thing that I'm totally not trying to instill some kind of bias in you before you weigh in? But yeah, what do you all think of this guy? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. As always, we've got the Patreon still going. It's just the $1 tier, but that $1 tier does get your name at the end of the video and also gets you early access to new videos that come out. Regardless of all of that stuff, thank you everybody for watching, and remember, art is more than meets the eye.